as well as Linda Ballmer, who was the wife of the late Treasurer Tim Ballmer, as well as the brother of former Councilman Greg Zix. I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for both of them. Thank you. All right, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Taberky?
Present.
Mr. Brickwig?
Here.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Here.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Here.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Here.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Here.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Present.
Let the record show that all 7 members are present. This time we'll go to new and referred items. What is council's pleasure on the approval of the written minutes of the March 17th council meeting?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to approve the written minutes of the March 17th council meeting.
Second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, a second by Ms. Hausfeld to approve the written minutes of the March 17th council meeting. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Okay, then the next item on the agenda is to discuss ordinance number 12. I believe Mr. Taberky.
Mr. President?
Mr. Taberky.
First of all, we got an email, letter to council a month or so ago. It should have been read. The last council meeting was not read concerning this ordinance. Would it be appropriate to read that now?
Actually, the communication came in on the Thursday of the special council meeting.
I understand that.
Our rules state that it should, any communication should be received by 3, I believe it's before 3 o'clock, get it out, on the Tuesday prior to the council meeting. This was a special council meeting, and that was only to discuss those ordinances. And that's why it wasn't read, because it came in that day. I hadn't even
But then we
seen
had
it
another
before.
council meeting after that. Because we had already had a second reading now.
We read the first, the second reading was at the special council meeting, which is when you referred it to the committee of the whole, instead of passing it at the special council meeting. So we have not had a regular council meeting since the communication came in on March 17th, which was the date of the
Okay.
original council meeting, which was that Thursday. Our rules
saying-
state it should have been in by
Okay.
Tuesday.
But
So
would
at
it
the
be
special
appro-
council meeting, all we did on the 21st was discuss the ordinances that were previously stated.
Would it be appropriate to read it now?
Doesn't really matter. It'll be read before the ordinance is voted on next council meeting.
But there's no other,
If the clerk has it and the clerk wants, that's fine. If that's,
Mr.
you want
President,
to read it, Mr. Bob
I
Culbertson?
think, Don, you're saying, because the next time we meet, it'll be the third reading, which we're not allowed to comment on it or discuss it at that time. So I think it's only fair that, you know, if we have that letter available, that we read it tonight, so we can respond to it. Or
Council has received, I mean, everybody received the email, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
If you, we'll go ahead and read it tonight. Doesn't matter to me, one way or another.
To council members and elected officials, I recently read the draft ordinance imposing a moratorium on cannabis-related businesses, and I hope council considers a few points before voting tonight. The arguments concerning the cash system required by dispensaries due to federal law are insignificant. For one, St. Bernard already has businesses that deal with cash, banks, bars, a cash-only liquor store, and vendors that sold goods at the fresh market in previous years. Why aren't these businesses considered problematic? With the requirements and regulations dispensaries must follow, it is unlikely these cash businesses will lead to laundering, tax evasion, and other crimes. I'd wager that there are more risks posed by a coffee shop with a tip jar out in the open than there are by dispensaries. In addition, cash-free payment processing is, in fact, available for what is considered high-risk businesses. It's being rolled out slowly and isn't 100% accessible yet, but it is happening. Bloom Medicinals in Hamilton is now taking debit cards. Patients and cannabisers will take advantage of that convenience over cash in the coming months as it becomes available for more places. Before the ordinance comes up for a vote, Language about the risky nature of cash businesses needs to be reevaluated. Otherwise, the vote will be on out of date and inaccurate information. This emergency ordinance applies to cultivation and processing facilities, and St. Bernard's industrial space would make it a perfect spot for such businesses. I strongly suggest council to do some research on Ohio facilities, including Grow Ohio in Zanesville, which is www.growohio.com, and Buckeye Relief in Cleveland, www.buckeyerelief.com. There's more to these businesses than processing cannabis products. Please take some time to read about these facilities and how they serve the community. Further dispensaries, processors, and cultivators know how to pivot and expand, evidenced by rapid changes in Ohio laws over the last years. St. Bernard needs to do some research before locking itself out of opportunities afforded by corporate cannabis. Finally, council should also want to talk to businesses that already call St. Bernard home. When cannabis and THC containing products becomes legal recreationally in Ohio, you can bet many of them will be looking to incorporate cannabis extracts, minerals, and products into their production or retail offerings. Passing this emergency ordinance has a real chance of inhibiting those businesses' future opportunities. For further reading, please make some time to gather some news, facts, and other updates about cannabis and medical marijuana in Ohio at medicatohio.com. Thank you for considering the above information before voting. Amanda Nielsen, 5124 in Wally.
Mr. President, if I may just make a comment.
Yes.
She's asking that you take time at the, at the very end, that you take time and consider it. I would suggest that that is what we are doing in this ordinance. We're not proposing a ban. We're just simply proposing a moratorium so that we can look into, for example, some of the zoning issues that may need to be developed. There's statewide, statewide that under the Ohio Revised Code, for example, cultivars, processors, retail dispensary, and laboratories cannot be located within 500 feet of a school, church, public library, public playground, or public park. Certainly a lot of our retail space here in St. Bernard would come within that orbit. And so there are actually not that many places in town where might well be suited to this too, because one of the things we would want to look at from a zoning point is do we want this in residential area? Do we want to put designate a specific area for it? This is the proposal the ordinance that I was asked to prepare was something that just gives us time to look at these issues. Doesn't say ban it by any stretch of the imagination, and I think that's maybe what the letter writer thought we were saying, but it's really not that. It's really saying, let's just take a little time, let's consider things, and make an intelligent decision about it.
Mr. President.
Thank you.
Mr. Bob Culbertson.
Just, Valerie, just trying to, I know the 500 feet pretty much wipes out, like you said, all the commercial areas. If a business wanted to come into St. Bernard, I guess they would either have to go to the industrial side of the tracks or residential. But wouldn't that have to go through a zoning? Because wouldn't they be trying to open a business in a residential area?
At this point, that might well be. I know that there have been some formerly grandfathered, what I would almost say would be grandfathered in locations. Non-conforming, thank you, non-conforming use. But I'm thinking of, for example, the old Greenlee Garage. It's kind of would probably be considered a non-conforming use in a residential area. When it closed, I understand from speaking with building department official that there's a period within like 2 years where you can move another what might be a non-conforming use into it. I'm not sure where that stands for the garage at this point, but I know, so sometimes you might get something like that in what would be considered a residential area. I don't know how many of those are open yet. That might be something we need to look at. And I think we increased under this draft did we increase it to 2 years, Ms. Penninghouse? I think it was. I'd initially proposed a 1 year, just to research those kinds of things. Again, I'm not saying don't do it by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think we want to be careful if you decide to go that way, just where it is put.
All right, Mr.
Mr.
President.
Bob,
Just, you brought up Greenlee Garage, but that's right next to a park, so it couldn't go there. So.
I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
even
no,
think
I'm
about that
just
part, because
saying.
it's right down the hill. You're
Yeah.
right.
So with this ordinance, I guess, we're not saying that this cannot be brought back up within the 2 years and us do away with it.
Yes, that's absolutely the other point. You know, if we look at this, Mr. Spencer and I sit down and then we all talk about it and we look at, okay, maybe here are the places they can go, and we decided you want to decide to move more quickly on it, yes. I mean, you're not bound by this. This is just an ordinance. And if you change your minds, we can, and we decide to move forward one way or the other, you can do so.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke.
you said, Valerie, our zoning laws and state zoning laws are very specific where they can go.
I'm sorry, say again?
Our zoning laws and the state zoning laws are very specific where they can go,
Well, where they can't go.
which means they can't go up. But another thing on the Greenlee Garage, I was told that since it was a non-conforming business, it had to be the same type business to go in there, even though, like Bob said, within 500 feet to the park, so it couldn't go there anyway. So
That might be an additional consideration, yes. We did get a request, end of last year, beginning of this year, for going into a former factory-type location that's zoned for that, but it sits in it sits in a residential area that is not good for in and out traffic. But it also did fall within 500 feet of a park, so it was banned that way. But, so they're just, these are all kinds of considerations that need to be discussed from a zoning a zoning approach, if nothing else.
I've talked to a lot of Cincinnati policemen over by my work, and they have no problems with the dispensaries over in the Ridge Avenue area. I said they already have a dispensary versus a bar, whatever that's worth. A lot of people I know who have MS, stuff like that, medical marijuana is a godsend. You have to have a doctor's license or a medical card to buy it. So you got to go to get doctor's approval to buy it. I just think we're tying hands for a 2-year moratorium.
In Ohio, it's a doctor's recommendation. Under Ohio law, you can't write a prescription for it, but it's a
You
recommendation.
have to-
You have to have that, yes.
Some kind of a medical card.
Right.
from a doctor.
And they are actively considering expanding conditions that might be covered for it. They've received 9 petitions regarding additional conditions, including, for example, opioid use disorder, spectrum disorder. I understand they're probably going to come out with a ruling before that, or on those 2 by summer. They're also looking at, it's being requested to be considered for degenerative disc disease, which a lot of people have, chronic pain, PTSD, anxiety, depression. I'm not saying don't do it. I was asked to prepare an ordinance. I did that. I'm not saying it's not a good use for some people. I'm just saying, like I said, I was asked to prepare it. I do think there are zoning issues that maybe we do want to consider if you want to move, you tell me what you want to do. That's what I'm here for.
Mr. President.
Bob Culbertson.
So if there's zoning issues, I guess we have a zoning board to look into those, those issues. So if a medical place, or I guess, just for clarity, are we only talking about dispensaries? I know you're talking about cultivating, but let's just say CBD oils. Is there that restriction too, that, a business can't sell those within 500 feet, or is it certain types of, use for the product?
Well, it says retail dispensary. So depending, I think, and I'm not this well versed on this yet. It might depend on the strength, whether, I don't pretend to be an expert in that area, sorry, that I don't have that level of minutia, sorry.
Mr.
But I can
President.
look into it.
Where the referencing that keeps saying zoning issues. The biggest issue that we have is that we don't address it in our zoning code. So giving us the time, and I don't honestly believe it's going to take 2 years. So, I mean, it doesn't mean that the 2-year moratorium would make that, we have to stick to that time frame, and that we could actually have that lifted. But we do need to address it within our zoning code. And if you look at how we're situated as far as, at least with reference to what Valerie was referring to as far as the last application, again, it was in a residential area, which really didn't eliminate it so much. It was the fact that it was within 500 feet of the park. But one of our issues being is that where again it could be situated with the large number of parks that we have, the churches, the schools, the library, everything else. And if you look at one of the places that would actually make most sense that we could discuss would be off of Kiley Place and Fisher Place, which would not fall within those restrictions. If you look at Google Earth, you look at Kagus, whatever, and you get the view of St. Bernard, and you can pretty much see how easy it is to eliminate those spots. But if we can go the proper route with actually having this brought up to the Zoning Board of Appeals, that we could actually have a hearing, this could be advertised, we could discuss the issues, the proper language could be drawn up. And so basically what you would be doing is the same thing that we did for the addressing of making available retail and service again to the Heritage Hill District. So we had a text change to the zoning code, which is the same kind of thing that we would do here. But we would be able to write that to basically be suitable for the village itself, which I think would only make sense. I don't want to ignore it. I think we should address it, and I think it should be actually written into our zoning code if the community desires to offer these types of businesses, which I don't think is a bad thing, but it needs to be addressed so that we don't have this problem.
Mr. Bob Culbertson.
So Jonathan, I know we talked about this in December last year, and now we're here in April. So who's moving the ball to, I guess, start those discussions and make sure we just don't pass on that, 2 years from now, we're sitting in the same spot.
So, Mr. President,
Mayor.
I'm going to repeat myself again. Even if we do this, so who's heading this up? We need to actually move this forward, if it is council's desire, to actually have this addressed in the zoning code. So basically I talked to Jerry Stoker about it today. He did say that, the zoning board of appeals would be glad to address it. We need to, if it's the desire to actually have this written in, then we need to make sure that we, publicize the fact that there's going to be hearings done. We want to be able to put together, whether it be, we put this in, back into committee, whether, there's actually specific language that we want. I think that Jerry Stoker would be a good one to lead that as far as, but he's not going to act until we say that, okay, yes, we want this done. But I still don't believe that even if the ordinance is passed, it does not mean it's permanent. I mean, it's obviously council's choice to choose whether or not they want to move forward with it or not. Either way, no matter what we do with this ordinance, this still needs to be addressed in the zoning code. So whether it starts today, tomorrow, whatever, it needs to be done. And we'll move forward with it, but we need to find out what's most fitting for the village and how it could be best situated in what we might have available in potential space to offer a business like this.
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberky.
you keep saying it's a 2-year moratorium, but if I'm a businessman, there's only a certain number of licenses given out to operate a business. Am I mistaken, correct, Valerie? The state has to issue the license.
I believe that's true.
So if I get a license and all St. Bernard's got a 2-year moratorium, screw that, I'm gonna look someplace else. To me, you're killing it for 2 years then. If the state has a 500-foot rule, we gotta live by that. What's the matter, Peggy?
Mr. President,
Mayor.
I totally get what you're saying, but we still need, we still need to address this within our zoning code. I don't care if we start it today or tomorrow. We need to address it. So regardless of whatever we're saying about the moratorium, yes, we need to make sure, though, that the village itself has it established as to where this type of business can be situated.
But if we don't have it on our books, we follow the state zoning laws, correct? The state says it has to be 500 foot, we have to do 500 foot?
Mr. President? Yes,
Ms. Van
the
Vogelbach.
the 500 feet, yes, it's the state regulation. I might also add, I think we did, this was, I don't remember if Mr. Geiser was the law director at this point. I think we did something like this with the adult entertainment district years and years and years ago. And so I think it's, you know, it's just, it is something, as Mayor Stitchell said, should be addressed in our zoning code, would be my recommendation, rather than just kind of leave it kind of piecemeal to, will somebody get a variance, will somebody not? I think if we have something, then people know, and they can look at it and make a more intelligent decision about whether or not they want to do it here. But I do think it should be addressed in the zoning code.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse.
so maybe I wasn't clear, Jonathan, on what you said about, you know, who is responsible for saying we want it to be put in the zoning code? Council? You? Who does that? Because I think what I'm hearing up here is we all feel it should be, well, some feel that it should be in the zoning code. And that's where the majority or we want it to go. So if it goes there and we want to start it immediately, then I think also what I'm hearing is, can't we start that process, and I don't know how long that takes for the zoning to do all that, and forego this particular ordinance while we're working in the zoning code committee to get zoning through, or whatever they need to do for this?
Mr. President?
Mayor.
Yes, I believe that is a logical solution. I think everybody wants the same thing, I would like to think, as far as at least define language. So if we have the opportunity to do that and work with, you know, the zoning committee and, you know, Mr. Stoker in guiding us through the process, and, you know, and of course along with Valerie, I don't see why we can't do that. If there is hesitancy and concern about deterring, you know, interest of potential, you know, business owners that would want to locate themselves here, I hear that concern. I think that's legit. So, but in the meantime, again, if we can define what we would like to see, so yes, I understand there are state restrictions relative to the zoning code, but we can also have our own local. So there may be something that St. Bernard may want to see in addition to being defined. So I would say we start that process and, you know, move forward until we can actually have the necessary public hearing to whatever we need to do. I mean, basically, it's all laid out and how the text change has to be done. So with respect to going forward with the zoning committee, then what we did with the text change for Heritage Hill, I mean, there was we had advertised it, we had a 30-day period with the zoning committee, then it was brought forward to council, same thing. It was advertised again. It was almost duplicate effort, but it was required. So once that was put out there, what was going to be changed, there's plenty of opportunity for discussion, and if any of the changes need to be made. So we can do this.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse.
it almost feels to me then that that should be our first step. And listen to the, you know, have the open meetings, go to the zoning, and then if we feel we need to come back and do an ordinance such as this, then that's the second step. But I think what I'm thinking is, feeling myself and hearing all of this, is that should be the first step.
Mr. President,
Mr. Rakeover.
this came forward, I thought, because we were worried about other possible residential areas that this could go in. I thought that's why we were kind of throwing the brakes and going to send this through the zoning committee to make sure there's no loopholes out there where somebody could come in and say, oh, gotcha, this is 501 feet away. And I thought that was the whole intent of this, was to slow it down so we could do it the right way and then rescind it at that point.
Mr. President?
Ms. Van Vogelbach.
Yes, that was my understanding as well. It was to avoid something going in somewhere where it might be, you know, zoning permissible, but maybe not appropriate, maybe not what we would consider appropriate use. So yes, this would give us time to do the work and look at where we want these kinds of things placed, if we want them here, and that's obviously a decision for you all. And like I said, I think this just gives us time to do that, and it is not written in stone. So for example, if you would decide, well, we want 2 years is too much, we'll get this done within like 9 months. So let's, you know, do something, so we'll put on a year moratorium. If we get it done within 9 months, because of all the hearings and everything, you can still move forward with it at that point. This does not preclude you from doing that.
Mr. President,
Ms. Brickway?
and correct me if I'm wrong, after about 20, 25 minutes of this, am I hearing correctly that basically this ordinance is to protect the village right now until we can get all of our ducks in a row? It's not saying you're for it, it's not saying you're against it. Like you said, we can change it, but I think it would be shameful not to protect the village. It just doesn't make any sense to me and go the correct way. I think basically if you don't do something like this, that's how a loophole's gonna get in here, and if we all haven't learned, we've been hit by that many a times. So, I get it, but at the same point, if somebody leaves because of this, well, then go somewhere else. I mean, I hate to say that, but I think we need to protect the village and its residents first and do this the correct way, and that's just my opinion.
Mr. President?
Mr. Taberky?
John, you said the only place you can go with the 500 foot is Kylie down that area, or out.
Mr. President, as
Mayor.
far as, okay, saying the only place, as far as in looking at anything outside of residential area that has any offerings, that was the only place that I could find. So, I
within
mean,
the-
you're
outside of the 500 feet.
correct.
Okay.
I mean, and I may be wrong, but I know you'll point that out to me if I am. So, I mean, but if you can look at other places, and you've been here longer than I have, so if you have any other ideas, that would be great, and we could explore that as well. But they're again, within the boundaries between what exists between Vine Street, Mitchell, and Ross, anything in the interior would not work because of our parks. I could not see any other option that would work, that wouldn't be disqualified based on what already is there with respect to the state code. And I don't know if, I mean, yeah, you could go down, I guess, below, I'm sorry, like on Vine Street. Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anything else other than one of those locations. And we could actually that could be another option, because I think that's actually, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that where our adult entertainment district is? I'm sorry, that's what's listed.
Where was that, Jonathan?
No,
She's asking.
no,
She's asking where, so let's clear that out.
Well, you fell for that one.
Yeah. Good job, Cindy. Yeah, where's that?
Okay, Mr. President,
You're
sorry.
asking for a
So,
friend.
I don't know the names of any of the businesses, but that's where the proposed locations would be. So that could be another option that we could include that could exist there, with Vine and Murray, that kind of thing. And I know that there was, if you've been down that direction, you can see where there is some viable space, I guess, but, as long as it's not disqualified based upon any kind of environmental issues. But, I mean, other than that might be a possibility. But those locations, as Councilman Taberky had pointed out there, as what I had pointed out off of, Ross Avenue, it's somewhat limited. But why not, if we can define it and say it's acceptable to be located in that point, of course, we can have the discussion between, council, the community, the police department, any of those things, those concerns, so that, we want to make sure that those areas are viable options.
So from what I'm hearing, do you need a motion from council tonight to put the ball in motion as far as having the zoning addressed? I mean, where is ground zero for that? Where do we start with that?
Mr. President, so as far as whether we, I need that, but that's fine. Why not? I mean, I don't know that it makes a difference one way or the other, but if council is expressing an opinion and a feeling together as a group that this is what they'd like to do, then fine. Then we go that route, and start the process and move forward. But as far as if there's hesitancy on the process of this particular proposed ordinance, then I leave that between council to discuss how we want to move forward.
And as Ms. Van Valkenburg said, the ordinance can be passed, but it could also be repealed whenever it needs to be repealed. So that's really not a big issue whatsoever.
Mr. President,
Mr. Brickway?
I wasn't here back in November when all this started up, I guess, and I'd just like to ask the obvious question. How many companies are in line to look to move this type of business in St. Bernard? I mean, obviously somebody wants to do this, or this wouldn't even be discussed right now.
Mr. President, as far as the number, I can't exactly answer. We had an application, and they basically were disqualified more or less from the physical location of their proposed business because of their proximity to our park. However, the issue came about, and what the concern was, is that even if to take away the park itself, the location was actually it was an industrial site at the end of a residential street, which would not be able to appropriately handle the increased traffic up and down that street. In fact, it's already not a overly safe street to begin with. So that's what brought up a lot of the concern, is that if indeed, even if it were within the requirements of what the state codes has to be able to legally be located, the concern was if it was going to be set up in a residential neighborhood. So that's kind of what brought it forward. But there was one, and in that application, we had to state, does your village or does your municipality have an existing moratorium? We had to actually state what would have disqualified them. But even though they pretty much should have known the obvious in their application.
Can I ask the name of the company?
Mr. President, I do not have that right off the top of my head.
Anybody have it?
We were just told
I didn't hear you, Don.
We were just told that a business was looking into moving in. That's all we were told.
This is the people that control the town, and we don't know who has the application? Seriously?
It was on, Mr. President,
So-
it was on the application. I believe it was I think it was an LLC. I just don't remember.
Is
I'm
it
sorry.
top secret?
Not at all.
Okay, where do I find this information at?
I can forward the email to you. I did also have a contact, I was reached out, or an attorney from, I believe, the Cleveland area, reached out to me last month. I don't know the name of that person's client.
Is the client the company?
Yes, the attorney reached
Okay,
out.
okay.
What I'm saying is, I was reached out then last month by an attorney asking me about where we stood on this position. That attorney did not mention his client's name. I don't know if it was the same entity or not from the previous application. I just know I received a contact.
Okay.
And I talked with that individual, and I said, we are currently looking at the possibility of a moratorium. We are discussing it.
I understand everything I heard for the last half hour. I would just like to know the name of that company, and I believe that should be public record.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, no, and I'm happy to, I believe I can access that and forward it to you. And
That's
anybody else who wants it on council.
That's a good starting ground right there. Then we can tell all the neighbors in town.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke.
also, this is a highly regulated business by the state. There's only a certain number of licenses given out for dispensaries, correct? So it's my understanding there's no license available right now for next year or two. They handed them all out already.
I can't speak to that. I can look into that. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Mr. President, Valerie,
Mr. Schultmeyer, sorry.
what I understood about this ordinance was that the intent was to prevent somebody from applying between now and if it takes us 4 or 5 months to come up with the right zoning, right? It's just protection, giving us leverage to say, hey, we're going to table this, so we got your application, but until we come up with our zoning. That's really all it's doing.
It would
right?
have that impact,
So it's giving
yes.
us protection against litigation while we spend whatever time it takes to figure out the right zoning, and it's either that or we're just at the mercy of the state zoning.
To some extent, yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
that's-
And there are lots of communities in Ohio that have passed similar moratoriums.
Right, so if it takes us 2 days to come up with the right zoning, in 2 days we can repeal it. It doesn't really matter.
Yes, this is,
Yeah.
this is not saying we're not going to do anything, and
Right.
nobody can do anything and move in for 2 years. That is not what this is.
it's just-
This is
it's
just
just-
kind of putting a hold on things
Right.
while we get our own ducks in a row.
It's really
and get-
preventing someone from applying while we try and figure this out, and
Yes.
then we have a problem if we want to change Because now are they grandfathered in? Are they not grandfathered in? Are they, do they gotta go by our new zoning, or is it the old zoning when they apply? Like, all that, we'd have to deal with all that if it happens.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons I believe the adult entertainment district was, years ago, was established too, because if you don't have something in your zoning, you are much more vulnerable that way, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right. While we're on, anyone in the audience wish to address council on ordinance 12?
Nicole Klungel, 551 Church Street. I've heard you talk a lot about protecting St. Bernard. I haven't heard you say from what? What's the real danger here? Is it the weeds? What's scary about this?
Mr. President, I'll take it.
Ms. Brickway?
Basically, it's covering us. We're not afraid of something or someone, but we need to get all of our ducks in a row, so in case somebody comes in, that we know we're doing it correctly. People are acting like people are afraid of the marijuana or cannabis, whatever you want to call it. It's not that. We're trying to do things correctly. And it's to, if you want, I guess if we're afraid of anything, it's a lawsuit. That would be what it is.
Mr.
Can I hear
President?
from, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, but I think as Mr. Sucha pointed out, and has been discussed, there are places in the community where maybe it's not within 500 feet of one of those spaces, but maybe it's not appropriate. And that was the situation that when we looked at the application that came in late last year, the space they were trying to go into, I think, really was just not, would have been, it just would have been really a lot of foot traffic, a lot of traffic there, and it's really not, wasn't a really good location, being as it was at the end of a residential street.
Right.
And I think that what this does is just gives us time to look at that and figure out if the community wants these kinds of businesses here, and I'm not saying yay or nay, where those would be appropriately placed, that's all. And it gives us time to do that. That's what we're looking at.
What steps have been taken to ask the community what they want?
Mr. President,
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
when this goes to the zoning board, don't we have public hearings on it at that point? So that's,
Mr. Culbertson, wouldn't the moratorium already be in place by then?
and like we said, the moratorium's for a different issue here for protection, but we can rescind the moratorium as soon as the zoning committee comes out with a decision. I mean, am I missing something there? We can, if it takes 2 weeks, we can rescind. If it takes 6 months, we can rescind it. We can.
Yes, Mr. President,
soon as
yes,
they
that
come
would
down
be
with the-
correct. I mean, that, it's just putting it's basically maintaining the status quo while we do the research and draft, look at the zoning and draft the appropriate zoning language that we want to have enacted. And, as I said, and as you said, if it doesn't take that long, we can move forward with it. It just kind of maintains the status quo for the time being.
Can I ask how many residential areas are zoned for these kind of businesses?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Ms.
what you
Vim.
said. Your voice kind of dropped off at the end.
Sorry about that. How many residential areas are zoned to accept these kind of businesses?
I'm not aware that we've had any that deal with this issue.
Well, they're presumably zoned residential, and I admit that I'm not well versed on this, but doesn't that mean you can't open a business there?
There are issues, like I said, with the non-conforming uses. It just gives us a chance to look at the city's footprint. My concern is, or my point is, it just gives us a chance to look at the city footprint, to decide where, if we want to put it, for example, in, near the adult entertainment district, wherever that is, and that kind of thing. It's a cohesive, what I think we would want, or what I would recommend, is that it be a cohesive approach that takes these things into consideration. So we're not dealing with applications as they come in rather piecemeal. But that may be, that would just be my recommendation. Obviously, council may feel differently.
May I say one more thing? I'm very curious if we have a remedy to go to the zoning board, why that hasn't already been started. There's been several months between when this company put in their application and now, so we could have already started this process and identified whether there are any areas of weakness.
President, I'd like to ask Ms. Nicole Klunkel, do you know the name of the company? That's what I was asking before.
No, sir, I don't.
You do not? Okay.
But I can submit a public records request if you like.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. No answer to that question that I asked? Okay.
I would also like to ask you one question.
Sure.
City, what is the benefit for the city to bring this business into town?
Well, I think there are probably several. One of them would be employment opportunities. One would be people who are local who need the medicinal product would have less far to drive. Small tax benefit possibly from the employees there. And then traffic coming through would have a reason to stop at local businesses.
And how far is it for the, I'm not sure if anybody out there has a medical card and purchases a, how much distance are we saving here on the gas mileage? I'm just curious. You brought that up, that's a good point.
I'd have to research that. I actually don't know where the closest one is.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke.
there's one over on Ridge by where the old Sam's used to be, by the old Kmart.
I drive there every day, it's very close. Thank you, Don.
All right. I believe we pretty much,
13.
name and address, please.
Yes, Melanie Quallen, 4918 Greenlee. I just have a few questions. I appreciate you all hashing this out so thoroughly. I'm learning a lot. So when we talk about protecting the village from lawsuits, specifically what type of lawsuit? Would it be a business coming in saying, hey, I want to open this business here, and you say, well, we don't want that business here for whatever reason? Are you saying you're protecting yourself from a lawsuit from that business, saying it's illegal for some reason for you to not let me operate here? Or what lawsuits are we talking about?
Mr. President, since she's directing that, I assume at me.
Ms. Frickwood.
I'm just curious because
No, that's fine.
I don't
What-
know.
What I mean by that is we don't have it all written out yet. So when you start piecemealing things, that's when we've gotten into trouble in the past. So I think if we do it the correct way, and I'm kind of like flabbergasted at this whole thing, because all the mayor's asking for is to please, to pass this, and we'll do it the right way. It's not if you're against, for, it's just to make sure we get all the rules in place. Because I would hate to see us say yes or no. It doesn't matter either way, and then it not be right. And I don't even know if the word's right, but we don't have anything backing anything up. So I think this is just to do it the correct way. You know, so it could be a lawsuit on either way because we don't really know we don't have it all together yet. So that's what I meant by that. Like say if you decided to come in and you wanted to open up and we said no, and then we work on some rules later on and it should have been a yes. It's just basically doing it the right way is the way I look at it. And like he said, we could change it. Everybody knows an ordinance is in law as long as it's voted on. So it can be changed at any point. To me, I'm just looking at this as it's the right way to do it. And in the past, sometimes we did, people would rush into things. And that's why I'm just like, take your time. And basically everything that was hashed out tonight, I'm sure would have been hashed out after if the ordinance passed, and it probably will be again. But it's just to make sure we do it the correct way. Not right or wrong, just the correct way.
Do we have in the village any special ordinances or any special laws in place that regulate liquor permit holders outside of, or that are more robust than what the state of Ohio has in place for liquor permit holders? I just draw a parallel with those two. I feel like this is a similar style business.
Ms. Van Valkenburg?
Mr. President, I'm not aware that we do one way or the other, but I would take exception with the fact that it's a similar style business. It's really not a similar style business, because I think there's the element that one of the concerns is because of the federal laws. For example, under federal law, a doctor can't write these prescriptions. You know? And because of that, and that's, although Ms. Neeson kind of did address this to some extent in her letter, there are a lot, it is still an evolving area, because it has been mainly a cash business. There are a lot of banks that do not want to do, because of the federal implications, have not wanted to deal with them, period, or won't accept their credit card payments, that kind of thing. So it's not it's not the same as a liquor business.
Is it similar to like a pharmacy then?
Well, pharmacies though will dispense medicines that are
regulated
and are authorized and are okay. The federal government approves of. That's not the situation with this. So it is a fairly unique animal in and of itself. Because of that, I think that's why we should take a little time and look and make sure that we're dotting our I's, crossing our T's.
Okay. One last question. And so we already have within the power to review these applications for these businesses that want to come here, correct? And we already have the power to say, well, you can't go in this specific spot for whatever reason. Is that correct?
Mr. President, well, not for whatever reason.
But like if we can outline.
There are certain reasons, yes. For example, the one that we did get last fall was in a location that was prohibited because it was within 500 feet. But it's not just for any reason.
Okay, gotcha.
Mr. President, I'll
Mr. Bob
piggyback
Coulson.
off of what you were saying. I think what you were getting to is, let's just assume, again, assumptions, that was 501 feet out. Whereas would they still have to go to a variance committee or a zoning committee for approval, assuming that, technically they were without, outside the 500 feet and they were just going to go into XYZ business, it was in a commercial spot, would they still have to come to us during the application process for approval, or could they just go ahead and open up tomorrow because, they've met all the criteria?
Mr. President, I think that's the concern.
We don't know if they.
Yeah.
So they could, so there wouldn't be a zoning variance or anything. It would just be like, hey, you checked all the boxes, we don't have a say.
I think that's the concern.
Okay.
That's why I think we need to look at this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. From what I'm hearing all night, it sounds like that ball's gonna start rolling, so. One more.
Hi, Sean Pratt, 551 Church Street. What's really striking is that we keep talking about we need time to work all these details out, and I don't know, it sounds like we're 5-6 months from this first coming up, and it also sounds like we collectively don't really even understand where the problems lie. It's hard to take seriously the proposition that a 1-year, 2-year moratorium won't end up being 2 years because you haven't moved in the last 5 or 6 months.
All right. Anyone else on this? All right. Sounds like work will be done. All right, let's move to reports of administrative officials. Mayor Jonathan Stuchel.
Thank you, Mr. President. In honor of Earth Day, Councilman Taberky and I will be hosting a Cleanup St. Bernard Day on Saturday, April 23rd from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. We'll meet near the lower level of City Hall where trash tongs, gloves, and bags will be provided. Please join us for lunch afterward at 12 noon at the community garden site on Tennis Lane. We will have our first work day building the raised beds. We'll also meet on Sunday, the 24th at 9 a.m. to try to finish up what we did not finish that Saturday. The Easter Bunny will be traveling around the village on Saturday starting at 9:30 a.m. The route will be publicized, or has been publicized, on the Rec Facebook page and be on the village website. Make sure that you come down to Vine Street Park on Saturday at 1 p.m. for the Easter egg hunt for toddlers through 8th graders. There will also be a petting zoo available. I'd like to welcome our newest patrol officer, John Kennev, who started April 3rd serving our village. You may not see him at first unless you are out during third shift, but I look forward to him getting to know our community. I know that there were several council members that were contacted by a member of the service department about their concern about our wages that are being offered for the part-time seasonal laborers. Currently, we have 3 positions of the 6 available to be filled. There seems to be a thought that because our steps are a little bit low, that may have been the reason why one individual resigned from their position who was assigned to the back of a Packer. I am willing to discuss this, but I feel that there are really only 2 part-time positions that really need to be addressed, and that would be that of the seasonal laborer and that of the lifeguards, which have the exact same pay scale. So I'm open to hearing some suggestions on that. If we feel that we need to raise those hourly wages to make them more attractive for retention purposes. Also, aside from that, I'd like to go into a little more. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about addressing the property that was damaged by fire on Greenlee, but we are moving forward with that, and I will give you additional information as that progresses. I also would like to be put on the agenda, whether it be for the next cow, but I did have a business that had reached out, and we are getting some legal opinions on an easement that was done many years ago on the parking lot next to St. Bernard Pub, or what was formerly Miners. The property owner is not able to reserve any spots for their patrons, and they've asked for our assistance in considering this a potential rearrangement of what was being done, but they're limited by St. Clement, basically. And I'm not saying just on Sundays, so it could be, funeral days, other things that are happening. And I understand the issue in the village not wanting to let that easement go in the past before the new lot was built off of Martin. That did not exist. But at this point, they cannot reserve any of their spaces. And I would like to address that so that we could potentially assist them. And they are reasonable people and would be still willing to have something offered. But again, there are days where they are completely eliminated from having anyone, come to their business, and there's no parking. So I would like to look at that somewhere down the road here very soon. So I would ask that council assist in entertaining that option.
Just for the record, that's not a St. Clement problem. That lot of the easement is with the village, with the city.
Mr. President, that's why I'm bringing it up.
That's what I mean.
But I'm saying that
St.
it's
Clement has nothing to do with it.
correct, other than the fact that what
They
I'm
use
addressing is that's who's primarily using that. But the actual lot owner who wants to make improvements to the lot cannot even reserve any parking.
And it's just that the village took down the building years and years and years and years ago. And, I'm willing to discuss payment on it, but I mean, it's just the way that it's been forever. Not
Mr. President.
opposed to selling them property, though.
John, you said that he wants to make, or they want to make improvements, but he can't?
No, that's, Mr. President, they want to improve the lot, but there's zero incentive because, again, they can't even reserve spaces for their own customers. So that is one of the main issues, is that they don't have parking that they can say is for St. Bernard Pub.
Mr. President, isn't part of the lease, they have to maintain that, though?
Mr. President.
Mayor.
They are maintaining it, but there's other things as far as like resurfacing, that kind of thing they want to look at doing, but they asked a question. I should have had them come to you, but my point being is that they're addressing council. They want the village to be able to do something. So they're a business. They could have come tonight, which maybe I'll encourage them next time, but they actually asked if the village would consider actually eliminating or restructuring that easement so that they could have some reserve spaces. The way it's written, they have none, and they own the lot.
Mr. President.
Mr. Bob Culberson.
Jonathan, I don't have any problem with us pulling the easement, just so we all understand what the easement actually says, and then discussing it at a future council meeting, or Cal meeting, I should say.
Can everybody get copies of it you can look at?
Yes, I will forward that on, and of course through Valerie as well. It's pretty difficult to read, to be honest with you. So, I mean, it was from our forefathers.
Just for the record, that was before me too, so before any
Are
of
you-
that.
are you sure?
Before any of that starts, I'm gonna, yeah. Anything else, Jonathan? Thank you. Auditor, Ms. Brickway?
Thank you, Mr. President. At the end of March, the village revenues were $3,982,530.67. The revenues are up $1,298,086.86 compared to 2021. The March expenses were $3,110,187.33, and the expenses are up $8,447.22 compared to 2021. The summer seasonal employee packets have been sent out. Please make sure that they are filled out completely. We've had quite a few turned back in and they're missing information. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. In case you've not heard, Sharon McCullough came back as the employee of our finance assistant. We welcome her back. Sharon right now is just helping Leanne get through tax season, and after tax season's over, I will start training her how she can assist me with the auditor department. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Well, you've got the floor. Do you have Leanne? You might as well do that.
The March 2022 tax collections were $1,758,612. The tax refunds for March were $11,559.23. Delinquent tax collected with capital recovery, $2,780.69. And delinquent tax collected with the Ohio Attorney General's Office was $56,468.94. As of March 2022, the earned income is up 48.11% compared to 2021. The taxes paid through the email portal, $8,058.75, and that concludes her report.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke?
Peggy, we got an email for,
Yeah.
to do additional appropriation for tax
Refunds.
refunds?
Yes.
It's $100,000, if I remember correctly.
Correct. That's what
Yes, yes.
that's what I had.
So,
Mr. President, make a motion to put an ordinance on the table for additional appropriations for tax refunds, $100,000.
how much?
100,000.
100,000? That's what she said.
That's what her email said.
Oh, okay,
100,000.
okay.
Do I have a second on the motion? A motion by Mr. DeBerke, second by Mr. Schultmeyer to have an additional appropriation ordinance for $100,000 added to tax refunds. Are there any remarks?
Yeah, Mr. President,
Okay.
unless she changed it from when she last talked to me, it was 2. So can you
Mhm.
make, yeah, but I could be wrong. Maybe
Is
she was looking over it.
The email said it was at least $100,000. She let us know if she
Okay,
needed
so
more.
how about we put it on the agenda and then we'll email you out exactly what it's gonna be. Like I said, she could have changed it since she talked to me last, so.
So we'll just put a motion on the,
Okay.
an ordinance on the table for additional appropriation for refunds.
Okay, thank you.
All right, a motion by Mr. DeBerke, second by Mr. Schultmeyer. Any remarks? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So ordered. That's it on hers then? Okay, all right. Law Director, Ms. Van Valkenburg.
I'm not sure I have too much more left to say. I believe you, thank you, Mr. DeBerke. I believe you will have before you the next council meeting, the third reading of the moratorium. I would ask you to pass it. If you would like to make a change between now and then, perhaps back to a 1 year after discussion today, let me know, but I would ask that it be on the table and be considered read next week. Thank you, or next meeting. Thank you.
If anyone's considering changing it, we'll have to table it. It's had its second reading, so
Yeah.
you can't amend it.
You're right. Okay, don't.
Okay.
We'll just,
All right, Treasurer, Mr. Unger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the statement from First State Bank for the 4th of July Memorial Fund down there. At the end of March, the total there is $5,666.32. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Safety and Service Director, Mr. Pohl.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have two announcements. Now's your chance to rid yourself of those unwanted tires. During the week of April 25th through the 29th, you may put your old tires out on your normal trash days. We will collect them. This is a once-a-year service provided by the village for free, as we do not accept tires any other time. Tires are not allowed to be stored on your property as they become filled with water and breed mosquitoes, so do not pass up your opportunity. On April 23rd from 9 a.m. till 11:30 a.m. in the lower parking lot of the City Hall, Miss Lillian Mittendorf and her father Don will be here to implement for Matthew 25 Ministries the annual paint drive. Various items are accepted, such as latex paint, clothing, and cleaning supplies. Let's try to fill up their vehicles once again this year. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Move to reports of standing committees. Finance, Mr. Tversky.
Just one thing, as Tommy says, to my community. We all like getting messages, but to me, it's ridiculous getting text messages, phone calls at 5:30 in the morning. On my age, I need my beauty sleep, my heart needs rest. So please refrain from calling or texting at 5:30 in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Safety, Mr. Brickwig.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to report on the fire department. They got a new pickup truck, has been upfitted and is in service, waiting for lettering at the end of next week. Also, the St. Bernard Fire Department hosted a fire officer command tactics class over the last 5 days at our firehouse, which was attended by St. Bernard, our department, and also Norwood fire officers. And last but not least, St. Bernard Fire and Police Departments provided and cooked a chili lunch for the Hamilton County Communication Center today to thank them for their service. It's National Public Safety Telecommunicator Week, so I'd like to thank all our 911 emergency dispatchers. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Service, Ms. Hausfeld.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight I have a couple announcements. One is for the first annual St. Bernard Police and Firemen's Benevolent Golf Tournament on May the 7th at Glenview Golf Course. For information, you can contact Kenny Davis at 1-513-910-6596. Food, drinks, split the pot, fun for everyone, and prizes along with the closest to the pin and door prizes will be available for that day. And that is, like I said, for the first annual St. Bernard Police and Firemen's Benevolent Golf Tournament. Deadline was supposed to be a couple weeks ago, but they are still, as of last week, they are still accepting more foursomes. If you guys, anybody wants to get involved, please contact him. The other announcement I have is the St. Bernard Women's Club on Saturday, April the 23rd at St. Bernard Municipal Building, 110 Washington Avenue. They are having what you call a silent auction, split the pot, help to raise money. The St. Bernard Women's Club donates scholarships every year, and this money goes to helping to provide those scholarships for students from here in St. Bernard. The auction begins at 1, doors open at 12. There will be refreshments served along with split the pot. New gently used items, if you guys can't make it, you can always donate new and gently used items to be auctioned off. And there will also be a couple special auctions as well. On a more personal note, I just want to thank all of our departments, but over the last few months, I've worked hand in hand with the fire department quite a bit with helping my mother get up and down steps and stuff like that. And there is not one fireman or paramedic or whatever their role is in the firehouse that has not been above and just really appreciate everything they've done for my mom. Thank you.
Thank you. Public improvements, Mr. Bob Culberson.
No report.
Thank you. Laws, contracts, and claims, Ms. Bettinghouse.
No report.
Thank you. Marketing, Mr. Ray Culberson.
Thanks, Mr. President. The next program for the Historical Society will be on April 18th at 7 p.m. Fred Waterman will be giving a presentation on the Cincinnati Red Stockings. I'd also like to take this moment to thank Nicole Klungel for her continuous work on the St. Bernard newsletter. And lastly, I'd like to thank Officer Petrafsky for his assistance with my niece who had a court hearing last week, and he couldn't have been more helpful or compassionate. And thanks to him. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Business and industry, Mr. Schultmeyer.
Thanks, Mr. President. Two things. One, Matthew 25 Ministries, in conjunction with St. Clement, will be holding a collection for Ukraine support. It will be starting the first week in May. You'll see a semi truck in the St. Bernard Square near the bus stop. They'll be collecting donations of personal care products, paper products, first aid items, clothing, new and gently used, baby and infant supplies, and then new stuffed toys. So if you can donate, please drop them off once you see that truck there the first week in May. Also, I wanted to just say congratulations to Wiedemann's for their second consecutive win of the 2022 Cincinnati's favorite beer, the Bohemian Special Brew. So congratulations to them. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council this evening?
Michael Simos, 4331 Greenlee. My role this evening is as a C9 committee board member, and while attempting to clarify eligibility into the program, the board discovered some antiquated verbiage that needed to be cleared up. And while eligibility does not need to be voted on or approved by council, one of the changes, we propose one change that does need to be looked at. I'm assuming this has to go to laws, contracts, and claims to review. The proposal is currently each eligible member can be reimbursed for up to $1,000 is the cap, and that is in, I believe, 5 separate categories. That there's a lot of confusion with amongst all the members on how that works. The proposal is to drop the max limit from 1,000 to 800 and then eliminate the separate category caps. For instance, currently the cap on prescriptions for annually is $100. I believe it's $600 for hospital cost visits, etc. And there's other categories that I don't have at the top of my head. We would just propose, again, that the category caps are eliminated and then the cap per member is reduced from 1,000 to 800. In essence, eliminating all of the confusion as to where the levels are, what can be submitted. It wouldn't change, it wouldn't add any benefit that currently isn't covered. It just helps clarify the ability to use the benefit.
Mr. President,
Mr. Bob Culberson.
I'll defer to Peggy maybe. Is that, do we set that or is that by the?
Mr. President,
Ms. Berkowitz.
I think some of the confusion is, I mean, you can put it in law, contracts and claims, but there's not a whole, it's a lawsuit it was a lawsuit, the city lost, and in the lawsuit is we have to fund the C9. So basically, we do put money into the C9 fund, which they take care of. So in all honesty, I would think you could just do a verbal vote saying okay, because they're actually lowering their benefit. They're just making it easier on the administrative end. So, because they have to pay administrative costs for this. So basically, they're lowering it from $1,000 to $800. But we put $50,000 a year aside for it. It's always, it has covered it. Who knows what the future brings, but it's a suit that we lost. So you don't really have a say in how it works. So I think you could probably just vote on it, accepting their change.
Mr. President?
Ms. Bettinghouse.
So Peggy, you said they're not lowering it, but it's going from 1,000 cap to 800.
I said they are lowering it. Sorry, maybe it came out wrong.
Okay.
My allergies,
Yeah.
sorry.
So why not keep it at 1,000 and get rid of the categories?
I think they just decided they wanted to have like a compromise because they're getting rid of 6. Because I sat in on a couple of them, but
Yeah, it's.
just to make it a little easier, and they all agreed on it. So.
Mr. President, just keep in mind it will cost you more in some cases. Like my mother, for example, she never was in the hospital for years and years and years, and she had her medicine that, we were capped at the 200. So if you raise that to 800 or 1,000, you would have increased the cost for the city by that $800. And that, if you kept it at 1,000 because mom's medicine costs that much. But I was never able to claim the whole amount because you kept it at the $200.
Because
So
it was
some
in that
cases-
category.
Right, because that category. So in
Sure.
some cases, you would be increasing your costs, and others may be
Right.
losing
Sure.
it too.
And
I
Mr.
get
President, that was the reason they lowered it, to try to
That
even
is,
it out.
that's the compromise.
Yes.
Okay, all right,
That's why.
all right.
There were
Thank you for explaining that, because I
multiple
couldn't find a
meetings
comment.
that you should all be thankful you were not a part of. Trust me on that. Yeah, and as far as eligibility goes, while, again, that doesn't have to be voted on by council, there was, as I stated, like one of the stipulations for membership was that you had to pick a state chosen insurance. Well, they don't even offer anything anymore. It's, you know what I mean? So it needed cleaned up, and we didn't add anyone in the eligibility. We're all bound by, each department is bound by contractual language as to, there's a cutoff as to any future employees are not even eligible. And those cutoffs were January 8th for fire and January 10th, January 2008 for fire and service and police. The contract was up till January of 2010. So we're not adding future eligibility. We just tidied up the language. So there's no real change there. The only change that needed to be discussed in an open forum is this monetary benefit change.
Mr. President,
Ms. Brickley?
would a verbal, because that
Yeah,
was kind of discussed at
we're just
council,
trying to go by what the
could make a
bylaws
verbal
state.
vote just approving that. I mean, it's up to you guys.
Mr. President,
Mr. Bob Culbertson.
I don't know if you want to make, I'm assuming we're allowed to.
I was going to ask.
It's gonna be my,
I have no idea. Yeah. I'm really I'm not that familiar with the wording of the C9 trust. I do know it was the subject of litigation, and so I would be hesitant to tell you you could do it verbally unless I've looked at it.
Is 2 weeks going to matter?
No,
That's-
I firmly,
That's what I'm saying.
anticipated it would
We'll
be,
give 2 weeks to look at it, and we can
Yeah,
we can do the
yeah.
vote at
Sure.
council meeting.
that's fine.
Okay.
If you-
Yeah, thank you.
We just had to start somewhere.
there you
And
go.
out of
'Cause I'm
curiosity,
done with these meetings. Not these.
sorry, Mr. President. Out of curiosity, I know, as you said, we can't put anyone else in there. How many are in it? How many are left?
Upwards of, in all those meetings, I should know this answer. Well, it's a fluctuating number because there are still current employees that are not yet members, i.e. like me, right?
Mike, Mr. President,
I want to say 50
Oh.
something,
we have 68.
68.
I'm part of the board also.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend that we go with this plan.
Member of the board, I'm glad you had the answer on that one. All right, so it sounds like we'll
Okay,
get
that's fine. I just,
direction and we'll make the vote at the council meeting.
okay.
Okay,
Mr.
thanks.
President,
Mr. Berkey.
we might need an ordinance.
Well, if we don't do it verbally, we'll need an ordinance, won't we? No? Well,
Yeah, I shouldn't have said anything, Tommy. So, Mr. President, make a motion, put an ordinance on table for the
C9
C9 if needed.
Motion by Mr. DeBerke, second by Ms. Benninghouse, to place an ordinance on the table for C9 changes if necessary. Any remarks? If not, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? So ordered.
Mr. President, I'll be abstaining because I'm part of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else in the audience wishing to address?
Nicole Klungel, 551 Church Street. Real quick, Mr. Culbertson, you're very soft-spoken, and sometimes I can't quite hear you. Is your mic operational? It doesn't
Can you
seem...
hear me now? No. Oh, I'll have to get a new mic. Can you hear me? Lou? Lou?
If you hold it real close, there's a slight, maybe?
Can you hear me now?
That's
All right,
better.
I'll just have to get real
That's better.
close. to
All right. Thank you. I
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Yeah, eat it.
If not, I show two ordinances then for next week, two new ordinances, additional appropriation for refunds and the change to the C9 if necessary. Third reading of ordinance number 12. This time I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Ray Culbertson.
make a motion, we adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Ray Culbertson, second by Ms. Housefeld to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.